let's talk about inflation and the importance of it. So, over the history, our inflation is not really the issue that we battle. I know it's what you hear all the time, prices going up, You hear your grandparents tell you they used to be able to buy a bag of chips for a penny back in 1950, what have you. Obviously, times have changed since then, and we look at the difference in that pricing as inflation. The real thing is that we need to understand is that it's not inflation is the reason that pricing is going up. It's actually the devaluing or the lowering in value of the dollar, which is the real cause of what we quote unquote deem inflation. So the Federal Reserve, as it prints money and increases the money supply, you have the same amount of money chasing the same amount of goods, which push upward pressure on products. And that is what we internalize as inflation. To some extent, pressures of the market, of the free market, are actually deflationary. And I'll put it to you like this. If you were alive in the 80s, some of you may be young, you remember how big a cell phone was, and you also remember how much it cost. Having a cell phone was like, you had a cell phone with a Rolls Royce. It wasn't just everybody that had cell phones. Now, I have 4-year-olds that have cell phones. It's very easy, very cheap. If you don't have a cell phone, you're just like, people think you're crazy or just warped or something. You got to explain why you don't have a cell phone. Like, it's become that easy and that simple. And the reason for that is pricing has gone down. Remember when computers came out? How much it cost to have a computer? Those prices have substantially decreased. A flat screen, you get where I'm going with this. And the reason for that is as society creates something and it begins to learn how to build it better, it understands how to build it cheaper and more efficiently and get it out to the masses. And that ordinarily is an excellent thing and the way things should be done. Issue with that is that if you have prices that are going to continue to go down, there's two things that people won't necessarily do. The first one is buy now. If you take houses, if you knew houses were the house that you wanted for $300,000 was going to be $200,000 in 5 years, would you be as urgent or quick to buy it now? Probably not. The second component of this, banks need inflation to protect their interest. And if you go to the aha moment, this is why inflation is actually targeted, because it gives banks an incentive to lend money. It also at the same time gives people an incentive to borrow money, which is why banks make more money and which is why we have a debt nation. Let me explain. When you take that same house, that $300,000 house, if you're incentivized to buy it now because you believe in 5 years that $300,000 house is going to be, let's say, worth $350,000, you're incentivized to buy it now at $300,000 because you want to get it while it's still cheap. The second piece of that is that you don't mind borrowing money and paying interest because you feel that you're going to make your interest payments back in appreciation. So I don't mind borrowing money and paying a cost to borrow that money if I feel that the house is going to appreciate and be worth more than what I paid for it. The third element of it is that if a bank lends on that house, and let's say I'm using FHA terms, I'm going to just say 3.5%, excuse my math here, but let's just say roughly the borrower put down $10,000 on that $300,000 house, and the federal, let's say $20,000, we'll make it like that, and the bank had to lend $280,000 on that house. If that house starts to depreciate, the bank's position is actually worse off. You understand? Because now they have, let's say, $280,000 outstanding on something that's worth $280,000. If for whatever reason they had to foreclose on that property, they would actually lose money. So the incentive to lend actually tends to go away, or it makes the position a lot worse for a bank. What inflation does is it protects the bank, but it also protects the borrower in some way, shape, or form because they're now incentivized to borrow because they feel that they're going to get the pricing cheaper now than sometime in the future. So how does all this actually tie together? The reason that the Fed wants to have inflation is because the banks make money with inflation. And what they'll put out there is, well, technically we all do, but the incentive is that we're now incentivized to borrow money and we're incentivized to act now, and it creates a revenue stream for banks to ultimately get richer and richer, which doesn't necessarily do much for our economy in the long run. But what can you say? At least banks make money, and as we all know, or if you don't know, banks run the world. So that's the reason for inflation. That's why we have it. And as long as we have a fiat currency and central banks that are able to print money, we can definitely expect it now and in the future. What I'm going to do in the next video is show you guys how to hedge against inflation and to protect yourself and your assets in the future, and the devaluing of the dollar, which is really what inflation is, but they don't necessarily want to tell you that. Okay? G. Kelley Dixon, Englestone Real Estate Venture Partner.